Hey, I actually spelled everything right. What you know about that? What you know about spelling everything right, even though I'm not messing around with my regular spell check. Anyway, welcome to another season session. I think I have decided to alternate, right? To alternate the season conversations and the season sessions. And so the season conversations is where I sit down and I have a season conversation with someone about some season topic, or it may just be a seasoned person to which you can just have a conversation with and can gather some wisdom, from that individual. And so I do have a couple of those, in the hopper. So that over the next couple of weeks, you guys will hear from some seasoned folks, people who are actually part of the season collective. And then on the alternate weeks, I'll come and I'll sit and I'll actually do a season session, which is topical related, something around some issue around being seasoned that I've either heard in conversation with someone, or I heard or I read something, or I saw something, or the epiphany just kind of hit my mind and decided that I wanted to sit down and talk about this. But this particular one is none of those things. This one is something I've actually been thinking about for a while, and this is actually a 3-module session. And so this is part 1 tonight. Week after next, I'll do part 2, and then the week after that next, I'll do part 3. And this particular session is literally on faith and fear. The topic of this particular one is called Understanding the Fear-Faith Dynamic. Understanding the fear-faith dynamic. Identifying fear and its hold, right? It's kind of interesting because even at this age, right? Even at this kind of season age we're at, fear, it's still a fear factor. Yeah. But it's still a factor, in our lives. It's like so many things that we just, still. And, when I use the word fear, it's not in this way that you're like a scaredy cat, right? We don't use that word anymore, but it is a word that we used to hear a lot, scaredy cat, not yellow belly, as the Westerners used to say. But just this fear, anxiety, stress with the unknown, with not having what you believe should be full control, those kinds of things. And so fear is still somewhat a part of our lives. And what I want to extract is really kind of understanding fear, but understanding fear juxtaposed to faith, and how the two of those interact. And hopefully in understanding that can help you look at some things that you may be fearful of and you've been fearful of all your life, to release you of that hole. You're in your season stage. I want you to be able to release any fears that you have, because you should be living a life right now that is free of negative fear. There is a thing that I believe that fear positively impacts, but I want you to get rid of all of the negative fear. And so let's talk about the anatomy of fear and what it is and what it isn't, right? And so fear is not always loud. It often shows up subtly, right? Whispering doubts, creating hesitation, and cloaking itself in logic. It isn't always the dynamic kind of fear we associate with danger. More often, it shows up in the day-to-day decisions we avoid, the conversations we don't have, and the dreams we postpone. So fear kind of shows up in a number of different ways, like I just kind of talked about. But what we're going to talk about in this brief session today is fear, how it does relate with faith, because I think that those two things are companions of life. And the better you understand what fear is and what faith is, the better I think you can have some level of control of the things in your life that you are fearful of. But let's do this first because I think this will help. Let's talk about the common disguisers as fear, right? Those common things that are in your life that you do to mask fear, things that we do and engage in that gives us the ability not to pay attention to our fear because we mask it with this thing as if the fear doesn't exist. But if we place this thing on top of it, then what it does literally is it puts us in a position where we don't deal with the fear we're dealing with. The first one of those things is perfectionism. I am a huge violator, of this conversation when it comes to fear, because I am a perfectionist. I don't like mistakes. I just don't. I don't know what it is about me that makes me not like mistakes. I just don't. And what perfectionism says is if I can't do it perfectly, I won't do it at all, right? I had to learn that even with my organization. I went through a strategic planning session some years ago. And the young lady said to me in the session, she said, that at some point you're going to have to let some tasks go so that others can do those things so that you could do the things that a CEO does and not get mired down in the weeds. That was the term that she used. Like there are some components of your work that you literally need to be out of the weeds. And she said, that just because someone doesn't do it the same way you do it doesn't make it the wrong way. It makes it their way. But if the outcome is what you are expecting in product and goal and responsibility and deliverable, then you're going to have to be okay with receiving some of those things not looking like the way you would do it. And so perfectionism is just one of those things. But the way that I've kind of dealt with it in my life is what I have chosen to do is to focus on excellence and doing everything that I do with a manner of excellence, understanding that excellence is the closest thing to perfection. And as long as I strive in everything in my life, I will get closer to perfection. It's one that I'm actually going through a little something right now that's actually driving me crazy. And I know you've heard me talk about my teeth journey. And I still got a ways to go. I had a setback that we have to correct. And I'm trying to do a lot of these kind of speaking things before I get knocked out of the box and I can't speak. I can work, but I can't speak. But one of the things that I have been struggling with over the last, 6 months, of this journey is my speech. And it is driving me crazy because I literally have, at the uppers, almost like a mouthful of plastic. And a result of that, my diction is off. And so the normal ways that I used to speak to pronunciate my words, I have to now do it with intention, and it's changed the cadence of me speaking. And I have to take some extra seconds to think before I say something to make sure that I am pronunciating all of my consonants and vowels and I'm not meshing them together and mumbling my words when I get lazy or when my voice gets soft, because sometimes I'll get soft. And when I begin to start speaking soft, my voice will start to mumble, a little bit. And so oftentimes I'll hear someone ask me to say what I just said again. And for some time I kept wondering, why are people asking me to say something again? It's not that I'm not talking loud enough, but sometimes when my tongue gets lazy and I'm not paying attention to the literal words that are coming out of my mouth, sometimes they can come out jarbled. And one of the things that is helping me push past that is to do these kinds of trainings and to do that, to see where the points are in my speech that I have to be more mindful of in making sure that I'm speaking the King's English. Just wanted to share that with you because I am about transparency. The second thing that often serves as a mask to fear is procrastination. What procrastination says is I'll do it when I'm ready, right? It's just a way that we push, things off. We don't want to deal with it. One of the things that I know that procrastination how procrastination shows up in my life is when I'm unorganized, right? And so when things begin to pile up in my head and begin to pile up around me and they're not organized, sometimes I can get into a mode of paralysis where I literally don't even want to approach anything. And sometimes it's because I just don't even know what to approach, right? And I think today, one of the biggest culprits of supporting procrastination is binging TV shows, right? And so I do it sometimes because I just need a relaxing of my mind. But there are times where I'm sitting and I'm watching a show. I'm watching 7, 8 episodes of a show just because I don't want to turn it off. And oftentimes I have to ask myself, is this show that interesting? Or are you avoiding something else you have to do? So procrastination is another one of those disguises of fear. The third one. The third one is people pleasing. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. And so as a result of not wanting to make people uncomfortable, your truthfulness doesn't come out. Your truth doesn't come out. You're more concerned about appearances than you are about whatever happens to be the subject matter. And so in this kind of season phase of our lives, right? It's one of the things that I think that oftentimes we begin to let go. We stop caring so much, about what people say about us, what people think about us, what people are going to do with what we describe as sensitive information. It's interesting because there are folks that, I've wanted to interview on my podcast, both of them, both this one and my I Am Dad podcast. And their biggest things is they don't want to talk because they don't want to share things, right? And some of these folks are seasoned. And I'm like, at your age, in my mind, what are you still hiding behind? Why are you still hiding behind? Why are you worried about how people are going to take what you have to say and how people are going to feel about something that you're going to say? Your truth, is your truth. And sometimes, pleasing others is not in the best interest, of your own life and what you're trying to accomplish, and putting yourself in a perpetual state of hiding, right? Like you're always moving with a mask on. That's tiring, man. Please, dude. Bruh, as the young people say, man, kick that mask to the curb. I mean, don't tell people, in our classes, I use this term, appropriate truth, right? So there is appropriate truth. You don't want to tell anybody all your business. But I'm talking about things that shouldn't matter with respect to the story, but gives more content and more context to whatever it is you're speaking about and how people resonate with you. And then there is self-doubt, right? Self-doubt says to you, what if I'm not enough, right? How many times have we heard that? Listen, if you haven't purchased my book yet, you need to purchase Too Seasoned to Care. Because in the book is these life experiences that I've gone through, gone down, that speak to these particular times when I procrastinated, times when I was trying to be perfect, times when I was trying to please people, and times when I doubted myself. And so I kind of speak about these things very openly. And it is my hope that when you hear those stories from me, it gives you the courage to take hold of your own stories, to analyze and to be able to absorb and understand how your self-doubt has been created by things that don't matter. They should have never mattered, but they definitely should not matter, now. And so, I talk about a couple of different instances, where, someone has kind of like really made me think. Sometimes you need someone to make you think about yourself, but not in a way that it makes you doubt yourself, because sometimes that kind of feedback can be controlling. Like, you got to be mindful and careful about how people feed into you, right? And so all of these things that I'm talking about, right, these are not personality traits. They are protective patterns born out of fear. And you know what they do? They cost you time, they cost you energy, and they cost you peace, right? And so you got to be mindful, of, those four things, because they are disguises, of fear. And once you push those things aside, then you can identify your fear. And then you can deal with the main thing, which is your fear, to kind of understand that. And then the work that goes into that is really beginning to establish, like, why are you fearful of this particular thing? Here is a key piece that you should understand. And it is this. I talk about this a lot. I talk about this, in my work. It really is the sum total of why I wanted to do these trainings. Because many of you know I'm a man of faith. I believe in the word. But I'll say this. I believe in the total word. Let me say that again. I believe in the total word, not portions of the word, not some of the word. I believe in all of the word, right? And so understanding the word in that way allows you to be able to kind of understand concepts, right? That allow you to be able to understand life much better, right? Well, understand this. Fear is the opposite fear is the opposite of faith. Fear is the opposite of faith. I want to say it the other way. Say it the other way. Faith is the opposite of fear. It's really important, to understand, that faith is the opposite, of fear. Why is that important? It's important because I believe that faith and fear can't reside in the same place, right? So if you are afraid of something, then I can't understand how you have faith. Because if you have full and total faith, you shouldn't be afraid of anything. Vice versa, if you tell me you are a faithful person, then I can't understand why you sit in fear. Because if you have full and total faith, fear can't reside with faith. The moment you are fearful, you are now no longer faithful, right? Let me say that again. The moment you are fearful, you are no longer faithful, right? While you are in fear, you are demonstrating no faith. Then in order to have no faith, you have to have no fear. Here's what the scripture says. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. He hasn't given us a spirit of fear. He's given us a spirit of faith. And so if you rest in understanding that the ultimate goal is being faithful and you're fearful, then according to the scripture, you have to start asking where that fear has come from, because the scripture clearly says that God has not given us a spirit of fear. And if God has not given us a spirit of fear, then we have to ask yourself, where's my fear coming from? But it's not coming from him, because he gave me faith. And from what Mr. Braswell just said, faith and fear can't reside in the same space, right? 2 Timothy 1:7, that speaks to that. And so the question is, when you start thinking about your fear, as it is constructed a little bit in Genesis 3:11, who told you you were naked? Who gave you a spirit of fear? Who told you that you should be fearful, that something is fearful? Remember before I said there is fear has its place, but you should not be fearful, because being fearful blocks you from being faithful. So when God asked Adam, where are you? It was a question that God already knew the answer to. He knew where Adam was. The question wasn't posed to him for Adam to tell him where he was. The question was posed for Adam for him to answer and to see where he was going to say he was, and then explain to himself, why was he there? He was there because he was naked and ashamed. But who told you that? Well, we know who told him, right? And it definitely wasn't God. So you have to look at your own life and look at your fears and begin to ask yourself, who gave you that fear, so that you can address, name that fear, and get over that fear. Here's a good thing, and you should know this. Fear has a voice, right? Fear has a voice, but it doesn't have to have the final word. Fear has a voice, but it doesn't have to have the final word. So today begins your practice of identifying the lie and replacing it with the truth. When you name fear, you take the first step in neutralizing its power of fear. When you take the first step, you're neutralizing the power of fear. But you got to name it. A lot of us, don't want to name it. And even when we name it, right? I want to say that we can be sometimes ashamed to name it because it's attached to someone that we're trying to please. Remember back in the beginning, I talk about people pleasing. Like, you don't want to name the pain out loud because you don't want the person you're trying to please know that you're fearful or you are fearful of them. So you got to be careful, about that. Name your pain. You cannot address it until you name it. Here's a good quote by Marianne Rottmacher. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow. Like, to be courageous, to be brave, to be unfearful doesn't have to be with this very loud voice or volumed action. You can take small steps into your courage. Naming your pain is one of those steps. That is a courageous step. And I believe that those of us who are in the season phases of our lives are more apt to take that step. In fact, many seasoned people that you hear publicly who somewhat becomes, I hate the word controversial, right? Because I think controversial is in the eye of the beholder. But when folks begin to get a little older and begin to say, you got people in your life, you got, seasoned people in your life that don't hold their tongue anymore. You know why? Because they don't care what you think. Like, they've lived long enough to not be concerned about how you think and how you're going to feel, about what they say, right? Sometimes what they say is warranted. And, sometimes, not often, it could be off the charts, but it's still truth. It's truth for them. So here's a assignment for you. Here are 2 questions I want you to answer. The first question is, where has fear led your decisions in the past? Where has fear led your decisions in the past? Think about some fear that you've had, and then kind of examine and talk about, as a result of that fear, what kind of actions did you take? More importantly, what kind of actions did you not take as a result of having that fear? The second question, what decisions or opportunities have you avoided because fear was louder than faith? Look back in your life and think about some decisions that you made, right? Perfect example of a decision. And I think everyone at some point in their life have made a decision about getting away from the wrong person. And when you go back and think about that person, the period that I want you to think about is the period between you deciding that this is possibly not the person I want to be with, and then the actual moment that you left that person. And for many of us, depending on the relationship in that person, for some of us who got really strong faith, I'm better at it now than I was back then. I don't need it now because I love my queen. But before her, it took me some time to kind of really know or be strong enough to cut people off, right? Now I do it to a fault sometimes. I don't give people a whole rope to be a cowboy before I cut them off, feelings or no feelings, just because I'm in that stage in my life. But I think that period is when you know you should make that break, but the time period to which you actually make that break is when fear and faith are fighting. It's when within you, fear is fighting with faith. You can juxtapose that analogy from a romantic relationship to a relationship with your job. Like, how many of you are in a job that you have made up your mind is not the job you should be at? It's not where you're supposed to be, but you're still there. You know why you're still there? because there's something fearful about you thinking about not having this job because you have placed some value in your mind with respect to your job that doesn't allow you to face the fear of not having this job. Some of it is warranted, right? Because I'm not trying to quit my listen. Man, I was about to say that and then at the same time thought about how crazy it was. I'm not about to give up my dream for my need, but we do it all the time. We give up our dreams for our needs because those needs are attached to someone else. And sometimes it's our children. Sometimes it's our spouse. Sometimes it's the necessity of having resources so that you can keep a roof over your head and food on the table and heat in the house, right? We get it. We get how sometimes you have to make decisions when it comes to life. But know that when you're in those spaces where you are fearful of a consequence of something that you should have faith in, you're always going to be internally and spiritually at war because God is trying to get you to a full and total faith moment, right? And as long as you are dealing and fighting with fear, you're never going to get to that faith place that you need to be at. So that's fear over faith. That's what I wanted to talk to you about in this session. There's actually 2 other sessions that I'm going to do in subsequent weeks. The second session is called Confronting and Dismantling Fear, where we're going to look at the roots and begin the work of dismantling its grip on truth, clarity, and courage. And then the last one is always the how-to, right? The last one is, man, I really kind of understand this faith over fear thing now, Mr. Braswell. How do I live faithful? The last one is called Living a Faith Over Fear Life. We're going to explore how to build a daily rhythm of bold, purpose-driven living that puts faith into motion. Man, it's nothing like, I ain't going to say I ain't never scared of nothing. I'm more cautious than fearful of things. And the caution for me is always to make sure that that thing that I'm thinking about, that is God speaking and not my own personal wants, needs, or desires. I'm speaking. So I'm always asking, to make sure that I'm listening to the right voice. 98% of the time, I think I'm hearing the right voice. But there are times where it's like, is that really God speaking to me, or is that me speaking to me? And so, but when you begin to start living a faith-filled life, man, the joy that you get from that and the freedom that you get from that, because that's what my book did. When I finished writing my book, man, I had and I have a freedom that I've never had before, because now I can articulate exactly in my life what has served as an obstacle for me to live absolutely freely of fear. And so thank you for listening. You have just now completed a season session. Continue to follow us. Purchase my book, 2 Seasons to Care, on Amazon. You can go to theseasoncollective.com. You can order it directly from me and get an autographed copy. You can also get the workbook. You can get a nice Christmas box, not only for yourself, but you can get one for others. I'm also on Audible and iTunes. You can listen to my voice, read the book, and so you can read it and listen to me in your car. Make sure you join our social media platforms. Share the collective with others. Bring them into the space. I know you're having these conversations with other people, so bring them into the space. We welcome our new seasoned collective members, and we're growing steadily. No, we're not growing crazy yet, only because I haven't really kind of push. I'm just kind of really trying to make sure that I'm creating the community that's beneficial for everyone that is in the collective. But continue to support. I love you, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Until next time, be good, be safe, be blessed, and peace out.